Admiral Zexathara stood before the massive viewing screen in the command center of the Eternal Dominion. The hegemony flagship stretched for miles in every direction, its dark metal hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Around him, dozens of officers moved with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and practiced after centuries of conquest. The Admiral's four eyes focused on the tactical display that showed their latest victory. Kepler Prime had fallen in just 6 hours. 6 hours from the moment the hegemony fleet appeared in their system to the moment their planetary government surrendered unconditionally. It was their fastest conquest yet, bringing their total to 164 consecutive victories. Lieutenant Commander Velnox approached with a datapad in his clawed hands. His scaled skin had the pale blue tint that marked him as one of the hegemony's most trusted intelligence officers. He had served under Admiral Zexathara for 40 campaigns, and had never once seen their forces fail to achieve total victory. "Admiral, I have the intelligence report on our next target," Velnox said, his voice carrying the calm tone that had become standard among hegemony officers. There was no need for excitement or urgency when victory was always certain. Zexathara took the datapad and scrolled through the information with practiced ease. The target was a small blue and green planet in a system called Sol, the third planet from their sun, designated as Earth by its inhabitants. The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his species. "This species calls itself human," Velnox continued. "They have achieved basic nuclear technology in spaceflight, but their advancement is severely limited by internal conflicts. Our scouts report over 200 separate political entities on their world, many of which are actively hostile to each other." The Admiral studied the orbital defense readings. A few primitive space stations, some basic missile defense systems, and a handful of nuclear weapons that could barely reach their own moon. It was almost insulting to call it a military challenge. The hegemony's most basic destroyer carried more firepower than the entire human species combined. Their technology level is approximately 3 centuries behind our current standard, Velnox added. They still use chemical rockets for space travel and have no energy shield technology. Most of their military forces are limited to their planetary surface with no significant space-based defenses. Admiral Zexathara handed the datapad back to his intelligence officer. In 300 years of expansion, the hegemony had developed a precise formula for conquest. First, they would arrive in overwhelming force to demonstrate their technological superiority. Then they would offer terms of surrender that allowed the target species to maintain some autonomy in exchange for complete submission to hegemony authority. Most species accepted these terms immediately, upon seeing the size and power of the hegemony fleet. Those that did not quickly change their minds after a demonstration of the fleet's destructive capabilities. No species had ever required more than 3 such demonstrations before surrendering completely. "What is our fleet strength recommendation for this engagement?" "Admiral," Velnox asked, though they both already knew the answer. The hegemony's standard protocols were clear and had never failed them before. 20% of our available forces should be more than sufficient, Zexathara replied without hesitation. "We have never needed to deploy more than 30% of our fleet strength against any target. This human species appears to be even less advanced than the Carillians, and they surrendered after seeing just 5 of our ships." The Admiral turned back to the viewing screen where the stars showed no signs of the countless civilizations that had once called them home. Each point of light represented worlds that now served the hegemony, their resources flowing toward the Empire's continued expansion. Earth would simply be the next addition to this vast collection. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Captain Kane Morrison stood in the observation deck of the orbital station Liberty Point. The station orbited Earth at a distance that gave him a perfect view of his home planet, but his attention was focused on the long-range sensor readings displayed on the screen before him. Morrison was a career military officer who had spent 20 years preparing for a war that most people believed would never come. He had studied every piece of intelligence about advanced alien civilizations that humanity had managed to gather. He knew that when first contact finally happened, it would not be the peaceful meeting that politicians and scientists hoped for. The first anomalous readings appeared on the sensors at 1437, Earth Standard Time. Unknown objects moving at impossible speeds had entered the outer edge of the solar system. Morrison's training kicked in immediately, and he began following protocols that had been developed in secret over the past decade. Red lights began flashing throughout Liberty Point as Morrison activated Protocol 7. The station's civilian personnel began evacuating to underground bunkers on Earth, while essential military staff remained at their posts. Similar alerts were being sent to defense installations across the solar system, each one preparing for an event that humanity had dreaded and planned for in equal measure. Morrison opened a secure communication channel to Earth Defense Command and spoke in the calm, measured tone that had been drilled into him during countless training exercises. This is Liberty Point Control to Earth Defense Command. We have multiple unknown contacts entering the solar system at high velocity. Recommend immediate activation of all defensive protocols. The response came back within seconds. Earth Defense Command confirms. All defensive protocols are now active. Prepare for possible hostile contact. As Morrison watched the approaching alien ships on his sensors, he thought about the years of preparation that had led to this moment. Humanity had always known that they were not alone in the universe, and they had always known that any species capable of interstellar travel would be far more advanced than they were. But knowing something and experiencing it were very different things. The approaching fleet was massive beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Hundreds of ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations, moving in perfect formation toward their small blue planet. Morrison knew that conventional military thinking would suggest immediate surrender or attempted negotiation. Instead, he quietly activated the secondary protocols that most of his own officers did not know existed. Hidden installations throughout the solar system began powering up systems that had been built in secret over the past 50 years. Humanity's true response to this threat would not be surrender or negotiation. It would be something that no alien species had ever encountered before. A fight to the death by a species that had learned warfare through thousands of years of constant conflict with itself. The hegemony fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, with the same precision they had demonstrated in 164 previous campaigns. Admiral Zexathara watched the tactical display as his ships arranged themselves in the standard intimidation formation that had proven effective against every species they had encountered. The formation was designed to be visible from the target planet while demonstrating the overwhelming technological superiority of the hegemony forces. The largest battleships positioned themselves at the front, their massive hulls gleaming with energy shields and weapon arrays. Behind them, ranks of destroyers and cruisers created a wall of metal and firepower that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Lieutenant Commander Velnox monitored the communication systems as they prepared to initiate first contact protocols. The process was always the same. Broadcast the hegemony's terms of surrender in multiple languages, wait for the inevitable panic and confusion, then demonstrate their power until the target species accepted reality. Admiral, we are receiving multiple communication attempts from the third planet, Velnox reported. They appear to be using primitive radio wave technology on several different frequencies. Our translation systems are analyzing their languages now. Admiral Zexathara nodded and activated the standard first contact message. The transmission was broadcast on all frequencies that the humans were using, ensuring that every government and military organization on their planet would receive it simultaneously. The message was simple and had never failed to achieve the desired result. People of Earth, this is Admiral Zexathara of the Hegemony Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have 48 hours to surrender your military forces and designate representatives to negotiate the terms of your submission. Resistance is futile and will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. The response came faster than expected, transmitted on a clear frequency directly to the Hegemony flagship. The voice was calm and professional, showing none of the panic or desperation that usually characterized first contact situations. Admiral Zexathara, this is President Linda Harrison of the United Earth Government. We have received your message and appreciate your offer. However, after careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your generous terms. We suggest that you turn your fleet around and leave our solar system immediately. Have a pleasant journey. The silence in the command center was absolute. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever declined the hegemony's initial offer. Most begged for mercy within minutes of receiving the message. The few that had initially refused quickly changed their position after witnessing a demonstration of hegemony firepower. Admiral Zexathera's mandibles clicked together in confusion. Either this species was too primitive to understand the situation, or they were displaying a level of arrogance that bordered on insanity. He decided to proceed to the next phase of the standard protocol, a demonstration of power. Target the asteroid mining facility in their outer system, he ordered. 3 destroyer-class vessels should be sufficient. Make sure the destruction is visible from their planet. The 3 destroyers moved into position around the abandoned mining station on the asteroid Ceres. Their plasma cannons, charged with a sound that vibrated, through the hulls of every ship in the fleet. When they fired, the mining station vaporized instantly, creating a brief new star in the darkness of space that would be visible from Earth with basic telescopes. The Admiral waited for the expected response. Panic, pleas for mercy, desperate attempts at negotiation. Instead, the same calm voice returned on the communication channel, and this time it seemed almost pleased. Admiral, this is Dr. Lisa Chang, Director of Xenological Affairs. Thank you for helping us clear out that old mining station. We've been meaning to remove that space debris for years, but never had the proper equipment. If you have time, there are several other abandoned installations that could use the same treatment. Admiral Zexathera stared at the communication console in disbelief. No species had ever thanked them for a demonstration of destructive power. The humans were either completely insane or playing some kind of psychological game that he did not understand. On Earth, the reality was very different from what Dr. Chang's diplomatic responses suggested. The destruction of the Ceres mining station had sent shockwaves through every government and military organization on the planet. Within minutes of the explosion, emergency protocols that had been developed over decades of Cold War planning were activated across the globe. General Marcus Stone stood in the underground command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching as status reports flooded in from secret installations around the world. The facility had been built during the height of nuclear tensions between Earth's superpowers, but it had been secretly modified over the past 20 years for a very different kind of war. All defense networks are now online, reported Colonel Pete Williams from his position at the main tactical console. Quantum field generators at full power, orbital platforms armed and ready, deep space assets moving into position. General Stone nodded grimly as he watched the alien fleet positioning itself in Earth's orbit. The politicians could play their diplomatic games and buy time with polite rejections, but the military knew that this would end only one way. Humanity had spent centuries fighting wars against itself, learning lessons about survival and warfare that these aliens had apparently never encountered. Dr. Elena Rodriguez emerged from her laboratory complex, carrying data pads filled with technical specifications that she had been working on for the past 15 years. Her prototype technologies had been dismissed by mainstream scientists as impossible, but the approaching alien threat had suddenly made the impossible seem very necessary. The quantum field generators are stable and holding at 97% efficiency, she reported to General Stone. The gravitational manipulation systems are online and ready for activation. The teleportation network is functioning within acceptable parameters. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, the hegemony fleet moved into standard attack positions. Admiral Zexathera had decided that this species required a more direct approach. The humans had ignored his generous offer and failed to respond appropriately to his demonstration of power. It was time to move to the final phase of the conquest protocol. Prepare for orbital bombardment of 3 major population centers, he ordered. Use minimum force necessary to demonstrate our superiority. Target their largest cities but avoid complete destruction. We want them functional enough to serve the hegemony after they surrender. Lieutenant Commander Felnox coordinated the targeting solutions as the fleet's massive weapons arrays began charging for their first real attack on the human homeworld. According to all their intelligence, this bombardment would end human resistance within hours. No species had ever continued fighting after losing 3 major cities. What the hegemony forces did not know was that Earth had gone completely silent for a very specific reason. Every non-essential communication had been shut down, every civilian had been moved to underground shelters, and every available resource had been redirected toward humanity's real response to this threat. Captain Kane Morrison stood on the bridge of Liberty Point, watching the alien fleet position itself for attack. His tactical display showed energy readings that confirmed what everyone already knew. The aliens were preparing to demonstrate their power by destroying human cities. It was exactly what the defense planners had predicted. The aliens expected panic, surrender, and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they were about to encounter something that no advanced civilization in the galaxy had ever seen. A species that had spent its entire history learning how to fight impossible odds and win through sheer determination and unconventional thinking. The hegemony fleet's patience had finally run out. Admiral Zex Thara gave the order that had ended the resistance of 164 previous civilizations. Begin bombardment of major population centers. The massive plasma cannons of 3 battleships turned toward Earth and began charging with energy that could level mountains. The first wave of destruction lanced down through Earth's atmosphere, aimed at New York, London, and Tokyo. Each blast carried enough energy to vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. The Admiral watched the tactical display, expecting to see 3 bright flashes marking the end of humanity's largest cities. Instead, something impossible happened. The plasma beam struck an invisible barrier surrounding the entire planet and dispersed harmlessly into space. The energy readings showed that Earth's atmosphere was completely unaffected by the bombardment. Every joule of destructive force had been absorbed and redirected away from the planet's surface. Lieutenant Commander Velnox stared at his instruments in disbelief. "That is impossible," he said, his voice showing the first signs of uncertainty that any hegemony officer had displayed in decades. "Our weapons penetrated the energy shields of the Zephrani Empire without difficulty." Their technology was centuries ahead of these humans. Admiral Zexathara felt something he had not experienced in his long military career: doubt. The tactical display clearly showed that Earth possessed defensive technology that exceeded anything in the hegemony's databases. This was not supposed to be possible for a species that still used chemical rockets for space travel. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Pete Williams watched the quantum field generators absorb and redirect the alien attack. The massive machines hummed with power as they converted the incoming energy into harmless radiation that dispersed into space. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood beside him, monitoring the system's performance with quiet satisfaction. "The quantum grid is holding perfectly," she reported. "Energy absorption is at maximum efficiency, and the field generators are operating within normal parameters. The alien weapons are actually helping to charge our own systems." Colonel Williams activated the communication system that connected him to defense installations around the globe. "Phase 1 is complete," he announced. "All stations report ready for Phase 2 implementation. Initiate hidden asset deployment." From hidden installations on the Moon, Mars, and in the asteroid belt, humanity's true response began to emerge. Ships that appeared to be constructed from salvaged alien technology, but which moved and fought according to principles that no alien species had ever encountered. Captain Julie Foster led the first squadron as it materialized from behind the Moon using stealth technology that bent light around their hulls. Her ships looked like they had been built from pieces of crashed alien vessels, welded together with human ingenuity and powered by technologies that pushed the laws of physics to their absolute limits. Her flagship, the Defiance, had been built around a gravity manipulation core that humanity had reverse-engineered from a probe that crashed in Siberia 20 years earlier. The technology allowed her ships to move in ways that defied everything the hegemony knew about space combat. The hegemony fleet detected the approaching human ships and immediately moved to intercept them. Admiral Zexathara felt a moment of relief as his sensors showed that the human vessels were smaller and appeared to be constructed from inferior materials. Perhaps this species had some defensive capability, but their offensive forces seemed to match their primitive technology level. That relief lasted exactly 37 seconds. Captain Foster's squadron engaged the hegemony forces using tactics that no civilized species had ever employed. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire like proper military forces, the human ships accelerated directly toward the alien vessels at speeds that should have torn them apart. The first human ship to make contact rammed directly into a hegemony destroyer. But instead of both vessels being destroyed in the collision, something extraordinary happened. The human crew used personal teleportation devices to evacuate their ship milliseconds before impact, leaving behind a vessel that was rigged to explode. With the force of a small nuclear, Weapon Commander Rick Santos led the second wave of attacks using a squadron of ships equipped with experimental gravitational field generators. Instead of conventional weapons, his vessels created localized gravity wells that pulled hegemony ships out of formation and crashed them into each other. The alien crews found themselves fighting an enemy that treated their own ships as expendable weapons. Every human vessel was potentially a guided missile. Every engagement was a potential suicide attack, and every tactical situation could change in seconds. As human crews teleported between ships and turned captured alien vessels against their former owners, Admiral Zexathara watched in horror as his perfectly organized fleet began to disintegrate under the chaotic assault of the human forces. His ships were designed to fight other civilized species that followed predictable rules of engagement. They were not prepared to face an enemy that viewed mutual destruction as an acceptable outcome. The human tactics violated every principle of military science that the hegemony had learned over centuries of conquest. No rational species would sacrifice their own forces so freely. No intelligent civilization would choose destruction over surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. But humanity was proving that they were neither rational nor intelligent by conventional standards. Lieutenant Commander Velnox frantically tried to coordinate a response to the human assault, but every standard tactic failed against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. When he deployed fighters to intercept human bombers, the human pilots rammed their ships into the alien fighters. When he concentrated firepower on human command ships, the crews evacuated and turned their vessels into guided missiles. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be learning and adapting their tactics in real time. Every hegemony countermeasure was met with a new human strategy that was even more unpredictable and destructive than the last. It was as if this species had spent their entire history preparing for exactly this kind of impossible warfare. Captain Kane Morrison coordinated the battle from Liberty Point, watching as his species demonstrated why they had survived thousands of years of constant warfare against themselves. Humanity had learned to fight wars where surrender meant extinction, where victory required impossible sacrifice, and where the only rules were the ones you made for yourself. Admiral Zexathara made a decision that no hegemony commander had ever been forced to make in 164 campaigns. He activated the emergency beacon that would summon reinforcements from the main hegemony fleet. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Empire's forces were requesting help to defeat a single planet. As the distress signal raced across the galaxy toward hegemony space, the Admiral realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. These humans had turned military science into an art form based on sacrifice, unpredictability, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. The battle for Earth was just beginning, but already it was clear that humanity represented something new in the galaxy, a species that fought not to conquer or to rule, but simply to survive. And they had made survival into the most dangerous weapon the universe had ever seen. The battle began with a display of human military coordination that defied everything the galaxy understood about space warfare. The human defense fleet did not charge headlong into the Korthak formation like barbarian raiders. Instead, they executed a series of complex maneuvers that seemed impossible for vessels of their enormous size. Admiral Blake's flagship led a formation that flowed through space like liquid mercury. The massive dreadnoughts moved with grace that belied their bulk, while smaller vessels darted between enemy positions with predatory efficiency. Their coordination was so perfect that Korthak tactical computers could not predict their next moves. The human weapons fired with devastating precision that turned the vacuum of space into a light show of destruction. Each shot found its target with accuracy that suggested their targeting systems could see the future. Plasma beams lanced through Korthak hulls while missile salvos overwhelmed enemy point defenses. General Vextar watched in growing horror as his carefully planned formation was systematically dismantled. The humans seemed to anticipate every move his fleet made, while their own tactics remained completely unpredictable. His numerical advantage meant nothing against such overwhelming technological and tactical superiority. Within the first 30 minutes of combat, the Korthak fleet lost over 40 ships without destroying a single human vessel. Their weapons bounced harmlessly off advanced shield systems while human return fire punched through their armor like paper. The battle was becoming a massacre, but the humans showed no signs of slowing down. Captain Morse coordinated the assault from his position aboard the Defiance while his weapons officers called out target acquisitions and successful hits. The veteran commander had fought in many battles but had never seen such one-sided destruction. The Korthak fleet was being carved apart with surgical precision. The humans targeted command ships, first crippling the Korthak ability to coordinate their defense. Heavy weapons platforms were next, eliminating the enemy's most dangerous offensive capabilities. Finally, they focused on propulsion systems, stranding damaged vessels and preventing retreat, while the main battle raged around the Thalassa system commander. Jake Torres led a desperate rescue mission to the damaged Zilani research station. His marine assault shuttles used advanced stealth systems to avoid detection while they approached the station through the debris. Field Torres and his Marines moved through the station's damaged corridors with weapons ready and medical supplies in hand. They found bodies of Zilani scientists who had been murdered by Korthak boarding parties but continued their search for any survivors who might still be hiding. The Marines discovered Zalthis sealed inside a laboratory section that had been cut off by hull breaches. The young Zilani scientist was traumatized and terrified, especially when he saw the armored human soldiers approaching him. He had heard stories about human ruthlessness and expected to be killed. Commander Torres surprised the alien by removing his helmet and kneeling down to the scientist's level. His voice was gentle and reassuring as he spoke words that would change Zalthis forever. "Hey there, friend. My name is Jake. We received your distress call and came as fast as we could. You are safe now. Let us get you out of here." The contrast between human military might and human compassion confused Zalthis as the Marines carefully extracted him from the damaged station. They treated his injuries with advanced medical equipment while speaking softly to calm his fears. These were supposed to be the galaxy's most feared warriors, but they acted like gentle caregivers. Back in the main battle, the Korthak fleet attempted a fighting retreat as General Vextar realized his forces faced complete annihilation. He ordered his remaining ships to form a defensive screen, while damaged vessels tried to escape into hyperspace. Even this maneuver was executed poorly against human tactical superiority. The human defense fleet pursued the retreating Korthak ships with relentless efficiency. Their faster vessels intercepted escaping enemies, while heavier units continued to pound the defensive formations. Human pilots showed skills that bordered on supernatural, as they flew through enemy fire without taking serious damage. Admiral Blake could have ordered her fleet to hunt down and destroy every remaining Korthak vessel. Her ships were faster and her weapons were more accurate than anything the enemy possessed. Total victory was within her grasp, but she made a decision that puzzled military observers throughout the galaxy. All ships ceased pursuit and formed defensive perimeter around the research station. Let the surviving Korthak vessels retreat. Our mission here is to protect the innocent, not to conduct a war of extermination. We have made our point and demonstrated the consequences of attacking peaceful civilians. The order confused both her own officers and enemy commanders, who expected the humans to press their advantage. Military doctrine throughout the galaxy demanded complete destruction of enemy forces whenever possible. Showing mercy to defeated opponents was considered a sign of weakness. General Vextar escaped with barely 30 ships from his original force of over 200 vessels. His flagship limped toward the edge of the system with hull breaches and failing systems, while emergency teams worked frantically to keep life support functioning. The proud Korthak commander had been utterly humiliated. Across the galaxy, military analysts struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The human defense fleet had demonstrated combat capabilities that exceeded every previous estimate. Their technology was generations ahead of anything else in known space, and their tactical coordination was simply inhuman. More puzzling was their restraint in victory. Every other military force would have pursued and destroyed the fleeing Korthak fleet. The humans had chosen mercy over vengeance despite having every tactical advantage. This behavior did not match their reputation as ruthless conquerors. Intelligence services throughout civilized space began reviewing decades of human military actions, looking for patterns they might have missed. The evidence was there, but it had been misinterpreted for generations. Humanity was not the conquering force everyone believed them to be. The Battle of Thalassa lasted less than 4 hours from first shot to final ceasefire. In that time, the human defense fleet had destroyed or crippled over 170 Korthak warships, while suffering only minor damage to their own vessels. It was the most one-sided military victory in recorded galactic history. As the human ships formed a protective formation around the damaged research station, their true purpose began to emerge. They had not come here to conquer territory or claim spoils of war. They had answered a distress call from strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. The Sol system was quiet for the first time in months. Where once the space around Earth had been filled with the massive forms of hegemony warships, now there was only debris. Thousands of pieces of alien technology drifted in slow orbits around the sun, testament to the complete destruction of the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. Admiral Zexathara floated in a rescue pod that had been recovered by a human salvage vessel. His four eyes stared through the transparent hull at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every proud symbol of hegemony power had been reduced to scattered metal and cooling plasma. The rescue had come not from surviving alien forces, but from the very humans he had tried to conquer. Captain Kane Morrison's recovery teams had searched through the debris field for survivors, saving every alien life they could find. It was an act of mercy that the Admiral could not understand. Now Admiral Zexathara found himself aboard the human flagship Defiance, sitting across a conference table from Captain Morrison. The room was simple and functional, lacking the ornate decorations that marked hegemony command chambers. Everything about human military design seemed focused on efficiency rather than intimidation. Captain Morrison poured 2 cups of coffee and offered one to the alien admiral. The gesture was small but significant. In hegemony culture, defeated enemies were not offered refreshments. They were processed for interrogation and eventual execution. Yet here was a human offering hospitality to someone who had tried to destroy his world. "I do not understand your species," Admiral Zexathara said finally. "You had the opportunity to capture our technology, to interrogate our crews, to learn the location of our homeworlds. Instead, you rescue our survivors and offer them medical treatment. Why?" Captain Morrison sipped his coffee before answering. "Because that is who we are, Admiral. We did not fight your fleet to prove our superiority or to gain territory. We fought because you threatened our home, our families, our right to exist. Now that the threat is over, you are no longer our enemy." The concept was alien to everything Admiral Zexathara had learned about warfare during his centuries of service. The hegemony fought to expand their empire, to gain resources to demonstrate their power over lesser species. The idea of fighting purely for survival, with no desire for conquest or revenge, was completely outside his understanding. Dr. Lisa Chang entered the conference room carrying a sealed diplomatic pouch. Her calm demeanor had not changed, despite the incredible victory humanity had achieved. She placed the pouch on the table between the human captain and the alien admiral. "Admiral Zexathara," Dr. Chang said, "we have prepared a message for you to carry back to the Hegemony High Command. Inside this pouch you will find safe passage documentation, medical supplies for your crew, and detailed specifications for a long-range communication device that will allow you to contact your homeworld." The Admiral stared at the pouch as if it might explode. After suffering the most complete military defeat in hegemony history, he had expected execution or interrogation. The offer of safe passage home was beyond his comprehension. "What is your message?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chang's expression remained professionally neutral as she delivered humanity's terms. "The message is simple, Admiral. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Continue to threaten Earth or any human colony, and we will bring our unique approach to warfare to every hegemony world in the galaxy." Captain Morrison leaned forward across the table. "We do not want to conquer your empire, Admiral. We do not want your resources or your territory. We want to be left in peace to develop our own civilization. But if you force us to fight, you have seen what we are capable of." Admiral Zexathara understood the implications immediately. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to completely destroy a hegemony fleet without losing a single major ship. They had turned the Empire's own weapons against itself and proven that conventional military doctrine was useless against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. 3 days later, a small human escort vessel departed from Earth orbit, carrying Admiral Zexathara and the surviving members of his crew. The ship was fast enough to reach the edge of hegemony space within weeks, giving the Admiral time to contemplate everything he had witnessed. As Earth grew smaller behind him, the Admiral realized that he carried more than just a diplomatic message. He carried the terrifying knowledge that the galaxy now contained a species that viewed mutual destruction as an acceptable alternative to surrender. The hegemony's 3-century expansion had finally encountered an immovable object. 6 months after the battle, Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of Liberty Point, now fully repaired and expanded into a major diplomatic facility. The view of Earth was partly obscured by the constant traffic of ships arriving and departing from orbit. The ships were not human vessels. They belonged to 12 different species that had once been client states of the hegemony empire. Word of humanity's impossible victory had spread across the galaxy faster than official hegemony communications, and representatives from oppressed worlds were arriving daily to request audiences with Earth's leadership. General Marcus Stone joined Morrison on the observation deck, carrying reports from the ongoing diplomatic meetings. The delegations all want the same thing, he said. They want to know how a single planet can successfully resist the galaxy's greatest military power. Morrison watched as another alien ship requested permission to dock at Liberty Point. We cannot teach them how to fight like we do, Marcus. What we did was not about technology or tactics. It was about being willing to lose everything to protect what matters most. That afternoon, General Stone addressed a gathering of alien diplomats in the main conference hall of Liberty Point. His words were simple but carried the weight of humanity's hard-won victory. We did not win because we were stronger than the hegemony, he told the assembled representatives. We did not win because our technology was better or our tactics were superior. We won because we were willing to sacrifice everything to defend our freedom. That is not something we can teach you. It is something you have to carry in your hearts. The alien delegates listened with fascination as General Stone explained humanity's approach to defensive warfare. They had spent generations accepting hegemony rule because resistance seemed impossible. Now they were learning that impossible was just another word for difficult. Within a year, the first successful rebellion against hegemony rule began in the Centauri cluster. The rebel forces used tactics that bore striking similarities to human military doctrine: asymmetric warfare, technological adaptation, and an absolute refusal to surrender under any circumstances. Captain Morrison returned to the observation deck of Liberty Point as reports of the rebellion reached Earth. In the distance, construction crews were building new docking facilities to accommodate the growing number of alien visitors. Humanity had inadvertently become the catalyst for the galaxy's first successful resistance movement. The irony was not lost on him. Earth had not sought to become a galactic power or to lead a rebellion against the hegemony empire. All they had wanted was to be left alone to develop their own civilization in peace. But by demonstrating that even the mightiest empire could be defeated by a species fighting for its survival, they had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. As he watched the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere, Captain Morrison realized that humanity's greatest victory was not the destruction of the hegemony fleet. It was the proof that freedom was worth fighting for, regardless of the odds, and that lesson was spreading across the galaxy, one world at a time.